Well, good morning. I hope you're finding your seat okay. I'm going to pause on the seating chart here for a moment so everybody gets a chance to find their spot. If your seat doesn't work for you, if you're too close to other people, you need to be closer to the screen, whatever it is, please let me know and I can adjust that for you. Okay, so let's switch to what we're doing today. So this seating chart is also available on Schoology if you need it. All right. So let's see if this is working. So at this point, you should see on the screen the slides. So I'm going to go over what you can expect this week, and then, of course, what we're going to do today. The first work that I'll start with is going to be week 7. So if you want to open up week 7, that handout on Schoology, your assignment, I'm going to go over some examples on that. So that's the first thing I'll do after I go over your schedule. Today, you can expect also a lesson on our second transcendentalist, Henry David Thoreau. So you're going to take a couple little notes on that. Also, I've planned this week pretty light so that you can get in any late or revised work. I see that I have about 10 things to grade. Right now, it looks like 2 of them are yours. All right, so that's today. We're going to review week 7, going to show you your handout, and then talk about Thoreau. Tomorrow, Tuesday, start with a little story. Some of you will be gone for the ACT. I will also tomorrow go over the first Thoreau work that we're going to analyze this week, which is Walden. So I'll get you started on that. Notice at the bottom here, it says what task you should have done on your week 8 handout. You can expect that you will never have more than 4 tasks. In fact, I'm looking to plan this. It looks like time-wise, I could plan this where we have 3 days of work and then a work day every week so that you can get stuff done. If I see students use the work day, if I suddenly get more assignments, I'll plan in more of those. So that's tomorrow. Thursday, I'll get you started on reading the second Thoreau work, which is Civil Disobedience. So Walden is part of a book. Civil Disobedience is an essay. Let's see. And then, so that's the work for the week, is learning about Thoreau, writing that down, analyzing Walden, writing your prompts for that, analyzing civil disobedience, and then at least 1 text citation. Friday, you can expect the entire class time for a work day for you to get caught up. Friday is also the day that weeks 1 through 7 are due by 11:59 p.m. So Saturday morning, I'll go into Schoology and unpublish those assignments. You won't be able to get at them, so it's done. That includes all 3 quizzes for this quarter. So if you haven't gotten those done, Friday is your absolute last day to get those in. And you have all the class period to work on it. So let's show you how this looks on your week 8 handout. And then I'm going to go to the week 7 handout. So for week 8, all of your grading this week is formative. So you get 5 points for showing your understanding of Walden, and then 5 points for showing your understanding and analysis of civil disobedience, and at least 1 correct text citation. And I'll show you how that looks on here. So as I keep saying, don't just Google answers without giving credit. Either pay attention in class, read the slides, or read the works, get the answers. So today, when I tell you about Henry David Thoreau, first thing you're going to write is one of the ways he was rebellious, because in his life, he was a rebel throughout the entire thing. So you'll write at least 1 example, I'll give you several, of him being a rebel. You're also going to write, just like you did for Emerson, why is he significant to American literature? So give 1 clear reason. I'll give you several. Tomorrow, when we start Walden, here are your prompts for that. So you're going to answer, what reasons does Thoreau give for moving to the woods? You're going to write 1 piece of advice or imagery from this book excerpt, and then your reaction or opinion to it. Now you can either summarize that or use a text citation. Then task 3 on Thursday, when we read Civil Disobedience, you're going to write what the background is in Thoreau's life that led him to writing this. I, of course, will tell you. And then for number 6, Thoreau is going to give several arguments for why citizens should reject majority rule of government. Detail one of those, or cite a line from the text that shows it. Just like with Emerson's work, you're going to decide, okay, for civil disobedience, which of the transcendentalist beliefs is it? And why do you think so? And then finally, at least one correct text citation from the work and your reaction or opinion of it. Okay, and that's your work for this week. At this point, I'm going to try to hop into your Schoology here and give you the example for week 7. So I want to review week 7. So as always, if I'm looking for examples in my work to either double check it or get started, I go to examples and resources. And I always put them in order. So the most recent one's at the bottom. Here we go, week 7. Let's make this a little bigger if we can. There we go. Let's go over some of these answers. So for example, for number 1, you had to write 2 characteristics of transcendentalism. As you know, there's 3, at least 3 beliefs they have. So one of them is people are born good and should follow their own beliefs. If you don't recall the second one, you can even look in this week's slides. I've re-included all 3 transcendentalist beliefs on there for you. So here you'll write the second one. And yes, you can have any of these answers. That's part of why I'm reviewing it. So 2, Ralph Waldo Emerson is significant to American literature because he started transcendentalism. Pause, you can get that if you're playing along at home. Okay, so next, Emerson gives several reasons why people shouldn't be conformist. And you could have either just written one of the reasons by summarizing or use a text citation. So here I did both. So here's my text citation. For nonconformity, the world whips you with its displeasure. Notice again, author and page number in the quotation or in the parentheses, and the period goes after the parentheses. And then I just explained, what does that mean? Typically, when you give text citations in your writing, you want at least one sentence explaining it. So Emerson is saying one reason people aren't nonconformists is because society encourages conformity. Society kind of wants us to follow rules. Pause so you can get that, and then we'll move on to number 2. So last week when you read Emerson, you also had to find out, just like for this week's work, which transcendentalist belief is in this, and why do I think so? So I think in self-reliance, the strongest transcendentalist belief shown is people are born good and should follow their own beliefs. And I think that because the entire essay is about relying on your own thoughts and opinions instead of being a conformist. So I'll pause so you can get that example if you haven't had a chance yet on your week 7 handout. And if I'm going a smidge too fast, like I said, this is on Schoology for you. So for 3, you have to find your piece of advice or an opinion from self-reliance and then what you think about it. So again, you can either here write a text citation with an opinion from the essay or summarize it. And then what's your opinion on it? Hard to get this wrong as long as it's reacting to the text. For nature, you're going to decide for Emerson's nature, which of the transcendentalist beliefs is this? I'll give you a hint. I think it's the one that has the word nature in it. And then why you think it's this belief. This question I wanted to make sure to answer because in the past it's been a bit challenging for students. So let's give you this answer. So number 2, what does Emerson mean in his essay Nature by transparent eyeball on page 373? Or you could have picked another example of phrasing and talked about it. So I'm talking about the eyeball. He's discussing the idea that all people are connected to God. So what he sees is less about him and more about the entire universe's connection. Or he can see all of nature is another way to put this. Pause so you can get that. Okay. So to end last week's work, you had to do the same thing you need to do at the end of this week's work, which is text citations. Last week you had 2, this week you have 1. So you find an example text citation, write it there correctly, and then what belief this is or your opinion on the example. And you're going to do that twice here. Yes, you can reuse a text citation from earlier in the handout. That is not a problem. So if you want to use any of the ones I've already shown you, absolutely can. All right, so at this point, I'm going to switch to week 8. So go ahead and open up week 8 on Schoology if you haven't already. And I'll end our time together here by going over Thoreau. I'm going to teach you about Mr. Thoreau, and you will write one way he was a rebel in his life and what makes him significant. So this is probably the most famous quotation from Thoreau's work, and it's from the book Walden. So I'll read this to you, and it kind of gives you a good preview of Thoreau's mindset, who he was as a person. So I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life, and see if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not, when I came to die, discover that I had not lived. So let's tell you about this man. Here's another piece of his thoughts. So Henry David Thoreau, the price of anything is the amount of life you exchange for it. So he is probably the second most famous transcendentalist. Emerson started it, and Thoreau really helped carry the movement along. Just like Emerson, he also went to Harvard. So we got some smarties here. He then, here's what makes him a little bit different from Emerson. He didn't go on to preach. He went on to be a teacher. That was originally his life goal. But he was a rebel all his life, and that made teaching difficult for him. Teaching really had a lot of specific rules, still does, and he just didn't care for those. So let me show you some ways he was a rebel all his life. So first of all, when he went to Harvard, freshman students were required to wear a black coat. He wore green. And this was a big deal because if you got enough demerits, enough points against you at Harvard, they'd kick you out. So all year long, his freshman year, they kept hauling him into disciplinary committees, talking to him about it, like, look, you're going to get kicked out. He's like, no, I like green. I'm wearing green. He quit teaching because, like I had said, there were a lot of rules. Specifically, one of the rules he did not like was it was expected that back then teachers would punish students physically. You were supposed to take a cane or a rod and just, get after them. He didn't believe in that. He thought that was a horrible way to treat fellow human beings. He thought it was a terrible way to learn. He refused. So he got into a lot of fights during his first job about that, him refusing to physically discipline students. Another way he was a rebel was with his family. Henry David Thoreau's family had money. And that sometimes surprises people because he writes so much about living simply and connecting with nature, but he does come from money. His family owned a pencil factory out in New England. And so everyone expected him, as the oldest son, to learn the business and run the business. And he had no interest in that whatsoever. He did not really, he would work in the factory, and that upset his father because his father's like, I don't want you just being a factory worker. I want you to be management. I want you to help me run this place. And no, Henry and David would work a couple weeks a year, get his cash and then live off of that for months. He lived very cheaply and wrote about it. And that really embarrassed his family. It's like I said, they had money. In 1846, and this will be especially important when we start talking about civil disobedience, the essay he writes about how you should protest against the government, he got arrested. And this is what led to writing that essay. So he got arrested specifically for refusing to pay something called a poll tax. This was a tax back in the day that basically meant you could vote. He refused. And the reason why he refused, and we'll talk about this more later in the week, is he was protesting government policies. Specifically, the poll tax had been added on to help pay for America trying to invade Mexico, essentially. And he just wasn't about that. He said, this war is incorrect, it's immoral, it's a land grab, and I'm not paying for it. Again, I told you he had a rich family. They could have bailed him out, and they tried, but he refused. He said, I'm going to sit in here because of the principle. So this was a person who not only rebelled a lot in his life, but if he thought something was wrong, he was real clear about it. Like he would follow up with his beliefs. The thing that probably makes him the most famous is in 1845, he, after reading Emerson and having conversations with Emerson and the other transcendentalists in the club, he decided he was going to go live in this cabin on Walden Pond and write a book about it. So he lived in this really simple cabin for, I think, like a year, and he wrote a book called Walden. We will read parts of that book tomorrow. Like I'd said, he also wrote civil disobedience after being arrested. So everything he wrote about, he lived first. He was not a fiction writer, all nonfiction. He wasn't popular or famous in his lifetime at all. He really kind of put people off. He was weird. He was different. I'll put it that way. Also, his rich background made some people discredit him. Like, what do you know about? He would write, for instance, about here's how we should help people who are poor. And understandably, some of the poor folk got upset. Like, what do you know about a rich boy? The other thing that made him like not famous in his lifetime is he wasn't that prolific, meaning he didn't write a lot of stuff. He published 2 things. And then most of his writing that we have is from this long journal he wrote. So he was more of a talker than a writer. Here's what makes him significant. So this is the second thing you need to write today. The first was one way he was a rebel, right at the top here. So he's significant for 2 reasons. One, later in the 60s, well, starting in the 40s, he influenced environmentalists. They read Walden and would quote him when they were arguing to protect the environment. So that's one way he's important. Another way he's important is he influenced political protesters. Same thing. That essay, Civil Disobedience, got quoted by Martin Luther King Jr., Gandhi, basically anyone who was fighting for people. The third thing that makes him significant was he was an early transcendentalist. So he's important like Emerson in that he kept the movement going. So any of those 3 things could be what you write for why Thoreau is significant. Once you have that done, you have the rest of the time to see what you're missing and get that in, including those 3 quizzes. Also, keep in mind, you can revise any assignment for a better grade. That's the whole point of learning, is to get to redo things until you got it. As always, if you need things, I'm here to help you out. Use your time. Get this stuff done. Tomorrow, we'll read Walden.